Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for men who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of their lives. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. So how could you realistically start a small business that can replace your income within the next 90 days? How do you safely make that transition from employed to full-time entrepreneur without putting your financial well-being at risk? Well, this is the question that my guest Sean Ogle and I are going to answer for you here today. The solution is called a bridge business, which allows you to bridge the gap between employed and entrepreneur. And this is the strategy that Sean and I both used in our careers to make that leap and safely transition from a paycheck to, frankly, a blank check. And it is the single most effective way for you to do the same. Sean, if you're not familiar with him, is the founder of locationrebel.com, and he's really the perfect example of a lifestyle entrepreneur who's managed to turn his passion for adventure, travel, and golf into simple, stress-free businesses. So if you're looking for a concrete step-by-step strategy to quickly and profitably transition out of work and into your own venture, this episode is exactly what you are looking for. So with that being said, please help me welcome Sean Ogle. Welcome back. Mike Dillard here. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart because I get asked this question all the time, which is basically, hey, what do I do if I want to start a business for the first time without jumping in and going full-time? And in fact, I've got a couple of friends who've done that, and it has become a challenge for them. Running out of income, running out of money, the business is taking longer to take off than they expected, and now they're in a really tough position. Well, our guest today, Mr. Sean Ogle, is going to solve that problem and provide you guys with a blueprint and a roadmap on how to navigate that process. So, Sean, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to it.
It's my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I have to say thank you, too, for taking the time to join us because you are in Vail on a ski trip, and yet you've taken the time to join us on the podcast. So thanks for doing that.
Well, lucky for you, yesterday was the powder day, so we're all good.
All right. Recovery day.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your story, because you're also known for creating a pretty unbelievable work lifestyle for yourself through your business Location Rebel. But walk us through your journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, totally. So I had the most average upbringing imaginable. White, middle class. I always knew what was going to happen. I knew when I was in sixth grade, I was going to go to Oregon State University and room with my best friend. I knew 6 months before I graduated, I got offered a job. I was going to go to work as a financial analyst. And it was always the path of least resistance. And I started in July of 2007 in finance. So basically peak of the market, absolute worst time to be getting into the financial industry. And by early 2009, I was miserable. We had seen the stock market go down by half. It was actually a new firm that I was working for. So they had moved from a traditional brokerage firm over to an independent business. So they were trying to move their whole book of business over at that time as well. And so everybody was miserable. Clients were unhappy because they were losing money. My bosses were unhappy because the new business wasn't going as well as they wanted. So I started looking for other options. And what I ended up doing was I begged my boss to let me use all of my vacation time I'd saved up to go down to Rio de Janeiro for Carnival for 2 weeks. And so I went down there with my best friend, had probably the most unbelievable trip of my life. We went hang gliding over Rio. We danced in the Carnival parade. We went down to Iguazu Falls, just amazing trip. And it was the last day I was sitting on Copacabana Beach and looking out at the sun and hot girls in bikinis. I'm like, all right, I should be able to do this whenever I want. And so that was what kind of set the scene for, me starting my entrepreneurial path.
Awesome. And what did that look like for you? It sounds like you didn't really have, a lot of time or cycles spent thinking about starting a business until that moment, which is a pretty daunting place for someone to find themselves in this day and age, frankly, because the amount of opportunities and opinions and experts are endless. So how did you navigate that?
Totally. So I owned a house painting business in college. So that's how I paid my way through school. So I knew when I graduated, I had two goals. I wanted to travel the world and I wanted to eventually own my own business. And I realized in my current position, I wasn't getting any closer to that. So the day that I got back from that trip, I was called into my office or my boss's office. And he was basically like, Sean, I want to hear all about the trip. But before we do that, I just want to let you know that you're going to have a 20% pay cut. it was either that, take 20% pay cuts across the board, or lay somebody off. And we didn't want to do that. So that was all the motivation I needed. And so I started, reading online, and I actually stumbled across a guy named Chris Guillebeau. So he has a blog called The Art of Nonconformity. Now he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he had just moved to Portland. And so I was reading, I remember one afternoon, I read every single blog post he had about lifestyle business, traveling while you're starting a business, all of these different things. And so I sent him an email and said, Chris, I'm going through, a period of time in my life where I'm trying to do something new. I'm looking at other options. I would love to talk more. Is there any chance I can buy you a cup of coffee? And so I, in my ill-fitting suit, I used to joke I was the only person in Portland, Oregon that had to wear a suit to work. I show up in the most hipster neighborhood in this Nordstrom rack suit, and he just starts laughing at me. And we met, and he was the one who actually encouraged me to start a blog. He said, hey, start publicizing all of these changes you want to make as a way to hold yourself accountable. So in May of 2009, I started a blog called Location 180. And then by the end of the year, I had left my job, sold my car, and moved to Thailand to kind of have an adventure and start building my business.
Nice. And what was the business?
So at the time, I talked about quitting my job on my blog, and a guy named Dan Andrews, who has a podcast called The Tropical MBA, he reached out. He said, Sean, I think what you're doing is awesome. I'm looking to bring an American guy out to Asia to basically work part-time to help me grow my business. And he had $1 million business at the time. And so basically he's like, I'll pay for your basic living expenses, and you basically work under me as an apprentice for 6 months. So I went out there and I met this random dude from the internet at the Bangkok airport at 1 a.m. And it was the best thing I ever could have done. So I worked for him part-time. He kind of taught me the basics of, SEO, copywriting, online marketing. And while I was doing that and experiencing all that Thailand had to offer, I was growing my blog at the time, which inevitably turned into my business, which was freelance SEO for a while, and then information products.
Awesome. So, we mentioned at the beginning, there's a concept or a strategy that you like to recommend to people that you call really a bridge business. So let's dive into that.
Yeah. So I kind of realized this 3 or 4 years down the road from doing what I was doing. It was just kind of this was the, the path that I took, not even realizing it. Maybe it'll kind of work for somebody else. So the first step of that is building the fundamental skills. So no matter what you're going to do online, there's certain skills that are going to be really beneficial to have. So copywriting, SEO, the basics of design, social media for business, how to build a website with WordPress. No matter what you do online, those are skills that are going to be really beneficial. So I recommend people learn those skills by starting a website. Maybe it's just a personal blog. Maybe it's a website to market their freelance services, which is kind of step number 2 we'll get into in just a second. Basically using this website as a training ground to then practice all of those skills. Step number 2 would then be taking one of those skills you excel at and freelancing it. Everybody's in a hurry to run into, the online marketing world and the affiliate stuff and the membership sites and the e-commerce, and all that stuff's great. You can make, really, large amounts of money. But the problem is, if you don't have the skills, they're actually relatively difficult to do. So by freelancing, you're able to build your income, you're able to build your confidence, so that you can get to that point where you're making, $3,000 a month, so that you've got options to leave your job, scale that business up, start something else with the free time you've got. And then finally, step number 3 is applying it to that, that passion project or that business that really excites you, that has the potential to, instead of doing $3,000 a month, the potential to do $10,000 or more a month.
Yeah, I actually did this when I was getting started, way back when. This is when I was waiting tables at PF Chang's and whatnot. I knew where I wanted to be, but I didn't have any money, frankly. I had more time, but I was teaching myself skill sets. So I was teaching myself how to build a capture page and how to use Google AdWords and how to split test and all of these things, which is, this is early 2000s. And so, okay, I'm learning this skill set, but I don't have any money to put into a Google AdWords campaign. So what do I do here? And this is way back when I was in the network marketing industry. And so I had people, in my upline, if you will, who are older school, guys and gals who didn't understand internet marketing. They didn't know what Google AdWords was, but they wanted leads, as any business did. And so it's like, okay, well, I've got the skill set. They've got the money. Let's figure out how to make this work. And so that's essentially how I got started, was running Google AdWords campaigns to generate leads for them that they funded and paid for. And, as they were coming in, they were opting into the capture pages that I'd created. So they were essentially building my list, and also those leads would then get distributed to those individuals on a share by share basis.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, I've now got $300 to $500 a day in ad spend. It's generating a couple hundred leads a day, and I'm not having to pay for any of it. But that's essentially how I got my start as well. And I could have gone down and kept that route and essentially built an agency and got paid. But at that point, it wasn't important anymore. I'd
totally.
I'd been, building my business and learning a skill set, and really the rest is history from there. So, do you have any? I have a process that I'll share in a minute, but I want to know your thoughts on what skills you would recommend someone to learn first. If you've got a methodology that will help them navigate that, or if you've just got a few core skills that you're like, go learn this first, this second, this third.
For sure. Well, I think the most important skill, and you could tell me if you agree with this, I think one of the most important skills anybody can learn, whether they're in business or not, is copywriting. If you can be persuasive with your words, you will never hurt for money, whether it's doing reviews for an affiliate site, whether it's creating landing pages, whether it's just sending emails that get the responses you want. If you can write good copy, then, that's an essential skill. So I would say, not necessarily becoming a professional copywriter, but the skill I usually recommend people start with is just freelance writing. There's, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are looking for good freelance writers. And it's a skill that a lot of us already have, at least to a point. There's different levels of freelance writing depending on your skill level. And it's a great way to build confidence because you can start making, $10, an article and work your way up to, $500 an article relatively quickly if you kind of know what you're doing. And so I find that probably 60 to 70% of the people that I work with, that's the direction that they start with because there's such a low barrier to entry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you look at any kind of online business, it really is precipitated by an art of words, mastering the art of words and then measuring through the art of math, if you will. But you need both. And so every single thing we do from an online standpoint requires conversion, and conversion requires mastery of copywriting and really persuasive communication. So without that, capture pages are not going to convert, your ads are not going to convert, sales message is not going to convert, and you're really just not even in a business at that point. So I couldn't agree with you more. Some of my favorite books and recommendations on copywriting are Scientific Advertising, which is kind of an old classic. You can actually download the free PDF on many places online. The Ultimate Sales Letter by Dan Kennedy is fantastic, and really any of Dan's stuff, all of it's really, really good. Any recommendations or favorites that you have?
Yeah, one, it's not necessarily a copywriting book per se, but Influence by Robert Cialdini.
Yep.
I think is one of the best books. I think everybody should read it because not only do you start to understand how people are persuading you on a daily basis, so you can be more aware and more in tune with what's happening, but it also allows you to take those strategies, and whether you're trying to convince someone to buy your product or convince your significant other that you'd rather go see the action movie than the romantic comedy, things that can be beneficial to all areas of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as far as skill set goes, I'm not going to sit on this too long because I think I've mentioned it plenty of times in the past, but really figure out how your brain works and how it's wired. For me, I'm very much a creative type. So writing comes naturally to me, yet at the same time, I would absolutely have to shoot myself if I had to do analytics or SEO or any kind of traffic campaign management, because I just don't like anything analytics based. So make sure that you understand what you're wired for, and I would start there. And you can always find your counterpart who has the other skill set that'll really help your business take off. So.
Yeah, and one thing I would add to that is, it's the kind of thing a lot of people are like, I want to start a business around my passion. And I kind of tell people, it's like, hey, when you're first starting out, I could really care less about your passion. I want you making money so that you can then later on do that. So like with SEO, was I passionate about SEO? Like, no, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it by any means. But I love the fact that it allowed me to work from anywhere. It allowed me to travel the world, and it set the foundation for what my business was going to come. So it's something to keep in mind where, I think there's nothing wrong with, for 6 to 12 months, doing something that isn't necessarily your favorite, understanding that it's a means to an end. But I think what you say is actually absolutely spot on. If you're going to go that route and do something that you're not necessarily thrilled with, make sure you've got a long-term plan for how to make sure you're not doing that over the long term. Do
you have any tips or recommendations on how someone can acquire their first set of clients, right? So if you're going to learn this skill set and you're going to go do it for others and make $3,000 to $5,000 a month or more, how do you go about finding those people?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways you can go about it. One, the easiest way is you can go to Upwork. or, any number of different sites like that. And if you know how to kind of work the system, so what I tell people is go take 2 or 3 really low paying jobs, get 5-star reviews, and that's going to make it much, much, much easier to get those higher paying jobs and those longer term contracts. People tend to shy away from it, or they think that they're competing with, people in Pakistan for $1 an article or whatever it might be. And you're not trying to compete with those people, but get a few things under your belt and start going from there, because that's the best way to make Upwork work. One of the other things I've seen work really well, every person I've seen that's applied this has had tremendous results. And this doesn't necessarily work quite as much from a freelance writing perspective, but if you're doing any kind of freelance marketing or SEO or things like that, this is actually something that I learned from a mutual friend of ours, Garen, where he basically said, take 10 things. Basically, he's like, I come up with 10 ideas a day. So, a couple times a week, I'll find someone who I want to work with online, and I'll come up with 10 really good ideas for their business and put a lot of time and thought and effort into it and kind of elaborate on each idea. It's like, if you did this, then I think you would see this result. And so he did this for me. So he sent me a message and said, hey, these are 10 things I would love to see on your site. And he was clear that he put a lot of time and energy into it. And there was 2 of them where I was like, hey, I love this. I think this is great. I don't have the time and capacity to write about this right now. Would you like to? And so he wrote a guest site or guest post and, got a bunch of email opt-ins from it. So I think doing that, I think, is a great underused strategy. And if you want to take it a step further, I've seen people that will then build 1-page websites around that concept. So it's like, I want to work with blank.com, and, one 4,000 word website, 1-page, 4,000 word website that's like, hey, here's 10 things I think you could do in your business that could help it grow. And if you do it in a way that is genuine and not trying to push yourself on them, I think it's an underused strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I mean, if you can demonstrate your value without being needy around it, it's an instant win.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you.
I was just going to say, so often, I'm sure you get this all the time. You'll get people that'll send you an email that's like, oh, hey, you should do this with your business, or I will do this for free. And I want to make sure that there's a distinction between those people, because I'll get, 10 of those messages a week versus kind of what I'm talking about, which is really putting time and energy and thought and not necessarily asking for anything in return. It's just like, hey, this is something I'm trying to do as a benefit to you because you get stuck in your business. So here's an extra set of eyes that maybe, is going to come up with something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great way to stand out from the crowd instantly. Very cool. So I think we covered the first 2 steps, right? And I believe there is a third.
Yeah. So the third is the thing. This is what everybody gets excited about. That's when you've got a little bit of money, you've got a little bit of confidence. Maybe you've left your job at this point. You've got a lot of extra free time. So, when you transition out of the bridge business to whatever the next thing is. And for some people, that's going to be trying to grow a 7 or 8 figure, big, massive business. For me, I've purposefully not necessarily gone that route. I'm the epitome of a lifestyle entrepreneur. I don't necessarily want to manage a big team. I want to be able to go take ski trips on a whim and go golf 4 times a week and, help people in the process, but do it kind of on my terms. So what I realized a few years ago is I learned all of this stuff about online marketing. I had a great business with Location Rebel where we built a course and a community that walks people through this kind of 3-step process that we talked about. But I realized I've got this passion for golf. And frankly, at the time, there weren't that many good golf sites on the internet. So I basically created a site called breaking80.com with 80 spelt out. And it was going to be documenting my quest to play the top 100 courses in the world. So I travel a lot. I remember I played one course in Central Oregon called Pronghorn, and it was the first really good golf course I played. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I want to take more photos. I want to experience more courses like this. And so the site has kind of snowballed from there. So I've now played like 37 of the top 100 courses in the world. I do some freelance marketing for a different golf company. What I've just launched last month is something called the 80 Club. So it's essentially it's a online society for private club members. So the idea being, hey, I'm going to New York. I want to play a private club where it doesn't matter how much money you have. If you don't know somebody, you're not going to be able to play. It's like, oh, we've got, 20 members in New York. Where do I want to play? Make an introduction. So basically help like-minded golfers that are both private club members that want to experience new places be able to connect easier.
Ah, very cool. Love the idea. And I assume you charge for that.
Yeah. So right now it's only $250 a year. Once we're at like 96 members. So the goal is once it gets to 100, we'll raise it to 500 a year and then slowly kind of bump it up from there.
Yeah. Awesome. Great way to pull out value and charge from it in a very unique way. I love that. Awesome. So, what have you done throughout your businesses that you think has made a really big impact? hey, I implemented this or I pursued this strategy and all of a sudden, we have a 6-figure business, on our hands.
Totally. So there's one thing I've done that I can basically point to and say, this is the single most beneficial thing I've done for my business. And this was something I was actually down in Austin. This was probably in 2012, having dinner with Derek Halpern. And this was before he kind of talked about this publicly. But he basically said, hey, when you're, getting people that are signing up for your email list, ask them a question, actually engage in them and get them to talk to you when, they're going through your autoresponder series. So basically what I did is in the first email everybody gets from me, I say, I want you to answer two questions, hit reply right now, tell me what you're struggling with, and tell me what your perfect day looks like. So immediately they're telling me what their problem is and what their solution looks like. So not only does that allow me to build products and courses around those issues, it allows me to use that in sales copy, but most importantly, it gives me the opportunity to actually hit reply and send them a personal note that gives them personal feedback based on what they said to me, and start actually building that relationship and building that trust. And so I've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years, and I've sent thousands and thousands of emails back and forth with people. And I've kind of learned it's a great way to get to like a $250,000 a year business. If you want to go higher than that, then you'll, have to adjust your strategy a little bit. But I think that's the one thing that I've done that has made the biggest impact, because when people get that email from me, and they say, oh my God, he's someone who cares. He's actually put the time and energy into, giving a thoughtful reply. When it comes time for them to buy Location Rebel or buy a course I'm offering, it's that much easier for them to justify the decision.
Yeah, I could absolutely see how that would work, because as far as I know, you're the only person that's really ever been willing to do that. For me, I'm like, yeah, that would be a great idea, but it also gives me nightmares because all of a sudden, all of my time would just be gone, replying to people and things like that. But I think when you can't take that for granted in the beginning, it's the most effective thing that you could possibly do, to build, like you said, build that relationship, build that trust, which leads to, people becoming a customer down the road.
Absolutely. And there's ways you can, I've altered it a little bit so that it's not necessarily they're going to get a response from me, but they will get a response from my community manager, Liz, or me, depending on my schedule. And I've wrestled with this a lot, because a lot of times, half of my day is spent replying to emails, but also when I can see that those emails are what directly leads to sales. And because, as I mentioned, I'm not trying to scale this up to a, 7 or 8 figure business. By doing that, it allows me to build real relationships, build friendships, help these people in a more meaningful way while still being able to do all the cool things that I want to do in life.
One of the brand new innovations along these lines that people can test or implement now is Facebook Messenger ads. And so about a month ago, Facebook now lets you essentially post ads into people's Messenger feeds. And it's unbelievably effective if you have someone, whether it's yourself or someone on your team, who's there to respond. Because essentially it's initiating a conversation via Facebook Messenger instead of email. And so if you've got, a high dollar product where every, one new sale a day makes a huge impact, and you can afford to hire someone or take the time yourself to do it and to be there and to answer those messages, you've now got access to that via Facebook Messenger ads. So it might be something worth looking into.
Have you personally tested that out at all yet?
No, because of that reason.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit there and answer messages via email. I'm super introverted, and it would drive me crazy. I just don't have the patience for it. And so I'd have to hire someone on my team to do it, but I just, we're not there yet. Maybe down the road, but I do have colleagues who have done it, and they're like, it's fantastic. They're increasing their revenue by tens of thousands of dollars a month doing that. So
wow, that's awesome. Cool.
What has been the primary revenue model for your businesses?
So my main business is my Location Rebel course and community. So it's a one-time fee of $500. And that gets you access to our online forums. That gets you access to, we've got like 17 blueprints that teach all of those specific skills that I mentioned earlier, and gives you a framework and kind of a step-by-step process for how to actually go about building this business. And with that business, I specifically made the choice to make it a one-time fee as opposed to a monthly payment, for the reason that it keeps the quality of our community higher. If we charge $49 a month or $97 a month, then you're going to get a lot of people that are going to probably come in, stick around for 3 months and then end up leaving. When you charge a one-time fee, people are in there for life. So we've got, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 plus members that have gone through this course. a lot of them have now, built, 6-figure businesses and still come back into the forums to help all the new people because they've got that lifetime membership. They feel like they owe a lot to the community, so they want to give back. Whereas if it was a monthly recurring fee, those people might say, oh, after 2 years, it's like, you know what, this has been great, but it's time for me to kind of move on to something else. And so there's pros and cons with that, but I found that that's worked really well. And then now with some of the newer businesses, like the golf thing I mentioned, there'll be more of a recurring revenue model.
Gotcha. And, from a lifestyle perspective or a nomadic entrepreneur, if you will, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned pursuing that kind of business, from your laptop, essentially, internationally?
Yeah. So for me personally, and this might sound a little counterintuitive, but probably the most important thing that I've learned is the importance of play. So for me, it's like a lot of times, I'll go out, I'll take a full like Wednesday off, or I'll take at least Wednesday afternoon off and I'll go golf. And so often we can sit in front of our computers for 12 hours a day, feeling like that's what we have to do in order to be productive, but we're really only getting 3 or 4 hours of work done. So a lot of time I'll put a like hard cutoff. I have to stop working at noon. And then I'll go do something fun, and I'll schedule something fun for 1 o'clock. So it's like, if I don't get my work done, then I have to miss it. And that's going to really bum me out. But by constantly reminding myself why I'm doing this, going out and golfing, going skiing, going and meeting people for coffee or whatever it might be, it's a constant reminder of, oh, hey, this is a privilege. This isn't something to be taken for granted. And usually that next morning after taking an afternoon off, I'll get much more done than I would have in that afternoon, or if I was feeling drained from putting in 12 hours the day before. So, I think that you have to kind of figure out what works for you as far as your hourly schedule and when you work, but more hours doesn't necessarily mean you're being more effective.
And do you, I assume, outsource most of everything to a remote team? Do you have customer service agents? What does your team look like?
So I've only got one person.
Okay.
My community manager, who's kind of jack of all trades, lives in Boston. I'm in Portland. She actually went through my course. She was one of the first people to go through it. And a year later, she said, hey, Sean, I wanted to let you know, I built up my business to the point where I'm quitting my job this week. Thank you so much. And I said, hey, that's awesome. You've been super active in the community. You've been great. Why don't you come work for me? And so she's been with me for 4 or 5 years now.
Awesome.
And then I'll hire, if I need design or SEO, then I'll hire people individually for that. But as far as permanent people on the team, it's just me and her.
Cool. Awesome. We talked about this in the beginning, but a vision standpoint, I struggle all the time with, one side of me who wants to build the $100 million empire. Yep. And the other side of me who likes working from home with a super small team and no stress. Yep. So is that, in the beginning, you mentioned that you're really in it for the lifestyle, but has that really been the case? Or do you have kind of that devil on your shoulder who's like, I could build this bigger?
There's part of you that's like, oh, it'd be pretty cool to, have a Ferrari or always fly like, suites class on Emirates or some of those types of things. But you also kind of realize, like, I look at it's like, if I were to scale up, right now my business is probably 300,000 a year. Mm-hmm. With one person, no overhead. So if I had a $3 million business a year with a team of 6 or 7 people, would I personally make any more money? Not necessarily. Would I have a lot more stress? Absolutely. And would my lifestyle change that much? Would I, be taking more trips or more elaborate trips or doing anything that different than what I'm doing now? Probably not. There's all sorts of ways to hack experiences. Like I flew Singapore Suites class on Miles last October, which was a pretty cool experience. It was like a $10,000 flight. I'm going around, I'm playing all of these private golf courses, some of the most elite golf courses in the world, where people are emailing me every week, inviting me out to play with them because I started the golf site. So yeah, there's also the ego aspect of it. You see your friends that are scaling up and they've got, these big businesses and you're like, yeah, that would be really cool. I'd love to do that. But there's the part of me that's learned I'm not going to grow for growth's sake. I'm not going to do it until I have a really good intrinsic reason for doing so. Because, my life it's pretty good right now. And so if I can continue doing what I'm doing and continue helping people on a more personal basis, as opposed to some of those people that now have, they'll do a launch and get 5,000, new customers where you obviously aren't able to interact with them on a more personal basis. So it's certainly something I struggle with. And, a year from now, my, tune may change. But right now I'm kind of like, hey, if I can get this to $500,000 a year business with 1 or 2 people across, a few different, products and niches, then that's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And how old are you now?
31.
31, cool. Awesome. Yeah, you're right in your sweet spot. From a financial perspective, I think, at least for me, turning 30 was a big inflection point where I felt the need to be a bit more responsible with the money that my business was making.
Mm-hmm.
How have you handled, the financial side of your company from an investment standpoint? Is that something you even think about now? Do you have some recommendations that you could make, when it comes to using the money that your business makes?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to look at it. Right now I've got a lot more cash than I probably should have, but a big part of that is because, rather than looking at investments in other companies or in the stock market, for me, it's been more real estate. The Portland real estate market has been insane. So we've got a rental condo, the house we bought a couple of years ago. So I'm looking for more opportunities there. And then otherwise, it's just kind of, making sure that I'm prudent. I'm not necessarily someone who's looking for really big gains. I'm mostly trying to avoid really big losses. Again, trying to not necessarily chase like the super big win, but like you said, it's like you turn 30. I got married a year and a half ago, talking about having kids here in the next year or two. So it's basically trying to do things that are responsible while, also giving you the potential to, make sound investments.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, this has been, I think one of the most useful podcasts we've had in a while, just from a strategic standpoint. One, because I think the discussion today is relevant to so many people who are in that transition point and starting their first business. This isn't rocket science. And it's funny, I get some flack sometimes from people who are like, Mike, every time I hear you talk, or read your products or whatever it may be, you're always saying the same stuff. You've been saying it for 10 years now. And I'm like, I know that's because that's what worked and what still works.
Absolutely.
Right? So, and what you've recommended here today is, very much aligned with that same, that same strategy. It is the process that works. So I think you've got some really valuable advice for folks that we've covered today. If you're in that position where you want to make your first $3,000 to $5,000 a month, guys, this is the way to do it. It's the way to do it with the least amount of risk. I think the worst thing that anyone could ever do is quit their job with the expectation that they're somehow going to be able to replace that income with their first business in the next 3 to 6 months. The chances of that happening are slim to none. And there's nothing worse than trying to figure out how to make money when you've got to pay rent coming up and you're out of cash.
Yeah. Yep.
So
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So go out and master a skill set. That really is the single biggest thing that you can do to change your life, is to go master a skill set that will empower you to take action and to implement the ideas that you have, and to implement them in a way that is effective and that will produce a result. You've heard Sean and I talk about the exact same skill sets today that have made a difference for us when it comes to copywriting. That allows you to sell in every single part of the marketing process. And then in addition to salesmanship, you need to have attention. You need to have traffic, right? So if I have the ability to write a sales message, I still need to put that in front of ideally thousands of people a day. So that's the second skill set. And if that is more exciting to you, learning how to master Facebook advertising or Instagram ads or any of those platforms will open up an entire new world for you. And in fact, that skill set alone is worth a couple of $1 million a year, because if you master Facebook advertising, you can turn that into your own agency, manage campaigns for someone like myself or Sean, and turn that into $1 million a year business. So the opportunities are endless. It has never been easier to get this kind of information or education or to acquire these skill sets. It's almost impossible to avoid learning how to do this stuff. There's so many books and courses and other people out there who are teaching this information that you just have to go do it. And so I think if you dedicate yourself to mastering at least one of these skill sets over the next 12 months, you can really write your own check next year in any form or fashion that you want.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the most important parts of that, so many people will read and read and read and read and then not do much. And I mentioned like starting the website, whether it's a personal blog or just a website where, you market your services or whatever it is, use that as a training ground. Like give yourself a vehicle with which to practice the ads or practice, the copywriting or the SEO or whatever it is. And you're going to learn a lot quicker than if you just go through a course, read everything, but then don't have any way to apply it.
Yeah, agreed. And, you mentioned starting an Upwork profile here at the beginning of the call to advertise your services or make them available. Guess what? You need to learn some copywriting basics so that you can write
totally.
an effective profile. and really stand out from all of the other service providers on there. Learn how to communicate the benefits of your work rather than what you can do, how the end consumer will benefit from your services. Learn how to reduce risk and eliminate that part of the transaction so that I, as a potential person who hires your skills, will feel safe in doing so. So, it never ends. It never ends. But, Sean, this has been fantastic. Some really good, granular, actionable advice that you've shared here today. And if you could, we've talked about them individually, but give people a few websites that they can go to connect with you on.
Yeah. So the main site is locationrebel.com. That covers all the lifestyle business stuff we've just talked about. At Sean Ogle, SeanOgle on Twitter and Instagram. And if you're into the golf stuff, then breaking80.com with 80 spelled out, or at breaking80 on Instagram. That's probably the biggest social media channel for us there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the time. I want to let you get back to enjoying Vail. Appreciate you connecting with us from your vacation spot, and have an amazing time. And thank you again, Sean. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
All right. Thank you guys so much. We will obviously see you next week. As always, I want to thank you all so much for your participation in the show and your support of this. We had our highest month ever last month with listeners, over 200,000 downloads from last month, which has just been awesome to see the growth of the show and the feedback. I'm so excited that y'all are getting the amount of value from this that you are. And thank you for sharing it, because we really don't promote this actively in any way. All of the growth is organic from your referrals and word of mouth. And so I really do appreciate that. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
now it's just like, man, you got to have that time where you just like disconnect from the scene, just the race. Like, and it's a race that I've created in my head, you know? But you have to step away from it.